Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, estimated speakers and respected attendees all around the world, good afternoon from my side. I don't know what time is it in your respected countries, but at least good afternoon from my side. On behalf of Sbey Research Center, I warmly welcome you to this webinar. Let me introduce let me start actually by introducing myself. And offering a brief overview of Sbey Research Center. My name is Ahang Habib Hawrami. I am a researcher at the Turkish Studies Unit of Sbey Research Center. Our center, founded in December 2023, Sbey Research is a rapidly growing institution committed to evidence-based policymaking and fostering informed public discourse in the Kurdistan region of Iraq, in the Middle East. Our work is built upon three key pillars, which include research, policy analysis and advocacy, and public engagement. Today's webinar is an initiative of the Turkish Studies Unit and focuses on the critical question, the Turkish peace process. The latest one, I mean, does Turkey seek to resolve the Kurdish question or merely a PKK issue? Our distinguished speakers include Professor Michael Gunter, Professor of Political Science in Tennessee Technological University based in the US. He is a leading scholar on Kurdish affairs. Professor Gunter has around 23 books and over 200 academic publications. His latest work is Erdogan's Path to Authoritarianism in the Counting Journey 2024, he examines Turkey's evolving political landscape. Our second distinguished guest is Dr. Ahmet Vedat KOÇAL. He is the assistant professor in the Department of Political Science in Dicle University based in Diyarbakır, Turkey. Dr. KOÇAL specializes in Turkish political sociology and the transformation of Kurdish identity. His research explores the impact of immigration, urbanization, and economic change on Kurdish political dynamics. Dr. Mashuq, or let's say lecturer Mashuq, he's a senior lecturer in sociology, Royal Holloway University of London, a Kurdish British scholar. Dr. Kurt delves into political Islamic in Kurdistan, youth and education, and social movements. He crucially examines Kurdish identity within the Turkey and its diaspora. This webinar will be moderated by my friend Nawras Jaff. He's a respected scholar at the Washington Institute for Near East Policies. I will give the floor to Mr. Nawras. You can start the discussion.
Thank you so much, Ahang. Thank you for everyone for having together for this great webinar on this great issue and questionable matter around the world, particularly in the Middle East. My great guests today from United States, from UK, and from Turkey. It is my great pleasure to discuss this great matter, and our great attendees. This will be my great pleasure to meet you here. I'm not going to talk about the introduction as it needs, as my colleague discussed a few seconds ago. As we know that from the March 2025, the imprisoned PKK leader Abdullah Öcalan has declared as a new initiative to peace between the Turkey and the PKK. It's about 4 decades the insurgency and the war between PKK and the Turkey are going on. Now it's a new initiative for peace process in the Turkey and in the Middle East. So I'm going to start my discussion in the webinar with Dr. Vedat. The first question would be like that. How do you interrupt, Mr. Vedat, the Turkish current stance on the peace resolution? It is aimed at addressing the root causes of the Kurdish question. We know that this is not a new issue. No, this is not a new question to the Kurds politics in Turkey. It was about decades. It's more than 1 century that the Kurdish issue has not been solved. So in your opinion, that it is focuses solely on the PKK's issue, or in your opinion, the Kurdish stance, how is it, and how do you interpret the real situation between the two parties?
Okay, first, greetings from Diyarbakır, everyone. Dr. Vedat KOÇAL. I'm a faculty member in Dicle University, Department of Politics and Social Sciences. My studies are focused on the Kurdish sociology in the southeastern region of Turkey in the terms of economic, social, and political change, especially by the factors of migration, urbanization, and capitalization. Before the beginning, I would like to thank Sbey Research Center for this nice academic event and invitation, and especially to Brez Ahang Habib Hawrami for providing me to be here with you. By her kindly invitation and formations, it's a pleasure for me to be with this inclusive group. The fact that my age limits the working skill of my memory, and also we don't face the need using English in daily life oftenly, sometimes I may have some difficulties to remember some words in English simultaneously. So I kindly seek your understanding to get some help from a text. The question I will seek to answer throughout my speech is this: why and under which determining factors did the conflict that has been going on for nearly half a century tend to end now, even though no concrete solution proposal was mentioned? My first answer will be around the Turkish state mind tradition, and the second will be around the economic, social, and political change of Kurdish population in Turkey. First, I would like to draw a methodological framework to let my opinions be clearly understandable. Inside the theoretical context of my studies about Turkey's political structure and life, the essence of the political system is all about the continuity and the preservance of the hierarchy between bureaucratic elite and people. From the warrior leadership of Asiatic Turco-Mongol steppe tribes or clans, who were named as Kağan or Hakan, to the jihadist and conqueror Sultan Caliphates, and to the soldier founders of the Republic, the ruling elites of the Turkish state have been the representatives of the ancient military tradition uninterruptedly. The state tradition in Turkey and the political memory of Turkish people were shaped on this historical continuity. Indeed, it's no coincidence that current president recently refers to the constitutional title of Commander-in-Chief, giving the impression of being a military leader, and that he bases a significant part of his and his party's propaganda on rhetoric of national security, anti-terror operations, and defense industry.
Sir Vedat, sorry for the interruption, but I got a question during your speech. You mentioned that you differentiated between the past and now. For example, the past, the military leaders has a great role in the peace process, and you saw that this is different. Do you think this different will have any effect on the process, even if it is positive or negative, in your opinion?
Okay, I will talk about it. So let's make a summary. In summary, I argue that the current political environment of Turkish social political memory and the state mind continue to be determined by Asiatic and Middle Eastern military traditions. Okay. Indeed, you know, army officers and intelligence service directors did the investigation of Öcalan after he was captured and arrested, but not civil police or judges. And also intelligence service bureaucrats conducted the talks with Öcalan from the first day to the present in the prison island, and also with PKK leaders in Oslo from the 2009 to 2011, maybe. As is known, the Turkish state has been a serious economic and political crisis for the last 17 years, since the effects of the mortgage crisis that broke out in 2008 in USA. In this process, the social movements reached almost a riot, named Gezi protests, during summer 2013.
Mr. Vedat, sorry again for the interruption. So in your opinion that the Turkish main motivation for the peace process is financial issue? In your opinion?
I prepared the speech for text, not answers. I prepared for answers the second period. So I only will answer your questions, okay? Not the speech, okay?
Okay.
Not the speech, because I prepared for some.
Okay, no problem. Carry
on. Okay. So let me finish, please. Let me finish, please.
Okay.
Let me finish, please.
Okay, we are hearing you.
Okay. I had trouble to hear you. From Turkey's perspective, so I'm finishing it. From Turkey's perspective, the most decisive factor in postponing Kurdish nation building process to an indefinite future is the economic personalities of the majority. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I have trouble on sound.
Okay, if you see,
can I want you to give the speech to Professor Gunter, please?
Okay.
I have a trouble in my ear.
Okay,
I can't hear you.
Okay, we will move on.
Sorry for this.
No problem. We will move on till Mr. Vedat will fix the problem. I'm going to start with Professor Michael. It's a great pleasure to meet you today. I'm going to start in with the question, especially the foreign relations. Turkey was outside of the world. How does Turkey's current diplomatic and foreign policy affect its willingness to negotiate or initiate a new peace process? In your opinion, the reality of the situation that the Turkey are in domestically and at the foreign stance are suitable and are suited with to negotiate or to accept a new initiative to peace process with PKK, which has its foreign and domestic and foreign effect on Turkey for more than 4 decades.
I have a prepared statement of 15 minutes. I understood that's what I was going to do.
Yeah.
Do you want me to do that, or do you want me to try to answer your question?
Anyone you can see fit to you, it's not a problem to me.
Well, I'd like to do my prepared statement, but I have a feeling we should move along quickly. So I'll try to answer your question. I understood you're asking me about Turkey negotiating the Kurdish problem is something to do with foreign affairs. To me, Turkey considers this a domestic situation. The Kurdish issue is a domestic situation. It has foreign implications, but Turkey is not interested in listening to somebody else, some other country interfering with its domestic affairs. So Turkey wants to handle this on its own. Now, I know everybody in the world is very enthusiastic about this peace process. I am not. As a matter of fact, what peace process? What peace process? Maybe I'm wrong. Indeed, I hope I'm wrong. But this so-called peace process with Turkey seems more like a PKK surrender. It does not appear to be a quid pro quo deal that provides for the PKK disarming and disbanding in return for Turkish guarantees of Kurdish political, social, and cultural rights. Indeed, where are there any provisions in this so-called peace process for the PKK fighters, supporters, and leaders, including Öcalan himself, to be accepted as be accepted in a suddenly democratized Turkey? I don't see that at all. As a matter of fact, I don't think the two sides are even talking to each other. And I'll just point this out. To Turkey, this is a domestic problem of terrorism. That's all it is. It's a problem of terrorism. To the PKK and its supporters, it's a much broader problem. It's a problem of Kurdish rights in Turkey. And I don't see that this peace process has anything to do with that. It's from what I can see, a surrender on the part of the PKK, and I don't think it's going to be accepted by the PKK if I'm right. Now, maybe I don't know what's really going on. I hope I don't know what's going on. I hope we really are going to have a peace process. So that's my attempt to answer your question. I still have my statement I could give you, but I think we should move on.
Thank you so much for your explanation. I think I got another question from your speech. Mr. Michael, do you believe that in the last recent years, Turkey's approach to the Kurdish issue inside Turkey has changed? Or in a broader manner, do you see any change in Turkish point of view toward Kurds or Kurdish issue? Or in your opinion, there is no any change? I wanted to hear your explanation. Is it changed or not?
I don't see any change. Time moves on, of course. We have different people operating. I think it was interesting that the leader of the MHP started this off in October. Usually he just refuses to even talk to the DEM or pro-Kurdish representatives in parliament. Erdogan himself talked about a new situation in 2005. It's been 20 years ago. I don't think we've made much progress in that 20 years. No, I don't see much change at all. As a matter of fact, Americans and in the West, we're always thinking of quick operations and quick change. I think in the Middle East, they play the long game, and they've just begun here. And I don't see any real change here at all. And maybe I'm wrong, and maybe there is something afoot here, but I do not think I've seen anything more than the old Turkish demand that this terrorism stop and the Kurds behave themselves as good Turkish assimilated citizens.
Thank you for your explanation, but there is another point which, for example, the experts say that the situation between 2005 and 2025 has changed. The situation, for example, in 2005, Erdogan has been at the beginning of his term in ruling power, in being prime minister, and then to become the president of Turkey. The question is that even the situation is changed from 2005 to 2025. This changing of situation doesn't have any effect on the change in mind of Turkey toward Kurdish issue.
One thing I've heard is that Erdogan amazingly thinks he's going to run for a third term. I've got news for him. He already ran for a third term. And he just reinterprets the Constitution. So now he's thinking about a fourth term. And somehow by starting this Kurdish peace process, he's going to get the Kurds to support him for another term in office. In 2023, one of the main ways Erdogan won the a narrow victory in 2023 was by accusing the Kurdish HDP party at the time of being a terrorist. And I don't see how Erdogan could possibly make a convincing change so quickly to get himself reelected on the back of the Kurds. Again, maybe things will change, but no, I don't see much of a change at all. It's the same sorry situation. The two sides are not even talking to each other. Again, as I said, to the Turks, to Erdogan, it's a problem of terrorism, and that's it. And to the Kurds, it's a much broader problem of Kurdish rights. And I don't see that at all. And that's why I don't see a change here.
Okay, thank you so much. We are moving on with the questions of the attendees. If there is any question to Mr. Professor Michael, we can take two or one question to Mr. Michael, if there is any question. No questions?
No.
We don't have any questions, Professor Michael, but to me, I have another question based on
yes,
the...
I have a question.
Okay, you have a question, okay.
I couldn't raise my hand. Omran from University of The Hague, professor at the University of The Hague. Yes, I would like to ask Mr. Michael a question regarding this issue is purely whether it is a domestic issue or not. As you know, Turkey is not a matter only of domestic issue as dealing with Kurdish or manipulating this peace process just to deal with the Kurdish issue in Turkey. As you know, recent statements talking about that it extend. I mean, the peace process, the giving up of military to Rojava as well, to Syria, at the same time, and also Turkey. On the one hand, Turkey wants to to utilize this peace process to deal with all political entities of Kurdish movements, not only in Turkey but also in Rojava and even maybe in Bashur in Iraqi Kurdistan. And on the other hand, as you know, there are different political agendas dealing with Kurdish issue, not only Turkish. Like in Rojava, we have U.S. interests, we have U.S. presence in that area, and also in Iraqi Kurdistan. How like my question is, do you think that it is really a pure domestic issue for Turkey, or it goes beyond the Turkish borders to extend to all Kurdish movements in everywhere, like particularly in Rojava and in Iraq? Thank you.
That's a very good question, and of course, the Kurdish issue is goes across the borders. It deals with Syria, it deals with Iraq, it deals with Iran, it deals with NATO, and so forth. But my understanding is that what we're talking about here is a PKK peace process with the Turkish government about the situation between the PKK and Turkey. This does not, the peace process does not have to do with Iraq or Syria or Iran. Now, in Syria, we already heard Mazloum Abdi say that any peace process between the PKK and Turkey is not going to affect the SDF in Syria. Matter of fact, as you know, just a couple of days ago, Abdi and El Shara met in Damascus and theoretically reached an agreement where the SDF and the Syrian Kurdish semi-autonomy will integrate into Syria. And this has nothing to do with Turkey. Turkey is not going to dictate the situation of the Syrian Kurds in Damascus. So again, of course, it's a much broader problem, the Kurdish problem, but I don't think that what we're talking about here is anything to do with that. Supposedly, this is the peace process between the PKK and Turkey, and I don't think that Turkey is going to be ordering Syria what to do about this, Iraq what to do about it, or Iran what to do about it. If the PKK somehow is disarmed and disbands, that will be one thing good for Turkey, but I don't think that's going to affect the KRG or the SDF or the Iranian Kurds.
Thank you, Professor Michael. Thank you, Dr. Imran, for your question. I think you got your answer too. We are moving on for Professor Mashuq to our questions. It's your turn. The first questions that I wanted to ask you to start the speech is why this time MHP? You know that this is the Nationalist Party. For the first time after 40 years, the insurgency between PKK and Turkey, this time is one of the differences for the other peace process is MHP has started the initiative. He made a statement by himself, Mr. Dawlat Bahçeli, he himself starts the peace process. He called Öcalan, and he pushed to make the process as success as possible. In your opinion, why this time is MHP?
Well, thank you very much, Nawras, and thank you for having me. Greetings to you from London. Slavo Rez, Jahamutam Shaban and Heja. Well, let me reiterate what Michael said. Obviously, sides have different motives and understandings of the situation, the problem at hand. I think for the Turkish state, obviously, they have always seen the Kurdish situation, the Kurdistan question, as through the lens of securitization. However, the Kurdish question in the Middle East, or the Kurdistan question itself, is a transnational issue that's today many dynamics in the changing geopolitical landscape of the Middle East is changing. Hence, we see this kind of radical statements that we wouldn't expect from figures such as Devlet Bahçeli, the leader of far nationalist, Turkish nationalist political party, and a de facto coalition partner of the government at the moment. We cannot basically interpret the situation without really looking at what is happening in the broader Middle East. Even though there are many ambiguities and there is no third oversight or international observers or any guarantees or international NGOs, if the process derails and the violence ensues again, as it was in the previous peace negotiations, most recently in 2015 and 16. So this basically make the Kurdish public concerned about the situation. But nowadays, if you ask the Kurdish leaders, politicians, the Turkish and Kurdish public, they will use the term ihtiyatlı or temkinli iyimserlik, so the cautious optimism or the prudent optimism, they would say. Indeed, this is a historic moment. And I think even though there are many ambiguities and questions surrounding the situation, I feel like the changing geopolitical order in the Middle East is forcing the Turkish state to do some concessions and deal with the problem Even though the question is transnational and becoming more internationalized, I think the Turkish state wants to keep it domestic and domesticate it if possible. I don't know if that is possible, and there is, of course, like, you know, a long process both for the PKK disbandment to materialize, and also given the recent development in Syria, the agreement between Mazlum Abdi and Ahmed al-Shar'a, we will have to wait and see how the situation unfolds, and also pay attention to what other priorities will emerge in relation to Israel's security concern and the new political order emerging in the Middle East, and in the long run, what is going to happen with Iran, and so on and so on. At this moment, what we understand that Abdullah Öcalan made a call and made some observations. By its nature, it is a negotiated integration into the Turkish political system and changing the means and the tools of the political struggle, from the armed struggle to the democratic struggle. Even though, as Michael has already stated, the interlocutors of Abdullah Öcalan, namely the Turkish state or the new Syrian administration, are far from the textbook definition of what democratic governance is, especially in the last 10 years. So I think there is this divergence. The way that the Turkish state sees it is to kind of eliminate the PKK's threat, and maybe in the process make some concessions, such as the release of the long-kept, unjustly and unfairly kept Kurdish political prisoners, thousands of them, first and foremost, starting with Selahattin Demirtas and Figen Yüksekdağ, the co-chairs of the pro-Kurdish HDP. Also, it seems that there is a possibility of the settlement for the PKK fighters after disbandment, possibly in the Kurdistan regional government or in third countries. And this is another indicator why this situation is not only a national issue for Turkey, but they have to deal with it internationally. So even though Mazlum Abdi stated that the call for disarmament is not related to the SDF, he indicated that normalization and democratization with the Kurdish movement in Turkey will facilitate the negotiation between the SDF and the new Syrian administration, which has been materializing. As I understand it, a couple of days ago, the memorandum of understanding signed between two sides, likely brokered by the American administration, and possibly Israel is also aware of the situation, or at least like behind the closed doors, I guess, like, you know, they have also some sort of approval. So returning to your question about Devlet Bahçeli, let's remember that this political party is one of the most nationalist, far nationalist political party in Turkey, and they have been an enemy of the Kurdish rights, and they have been like demonizing, dehumanizing the Kurdish political struggle to a great degree. So it is impossible to think that one night Devlet Bahçeli wake up from a deep dream and all of the sudden he wants to democratize Turkey and he leads this democratic process. Obviously, he is aware that the new situation for the Kurdistan question in the Middle East is becoming quite international with the involvement of the political powers, and they want to also take their precautions to be able to prevent, or at least come to some agreeable conclusions. And I think it could benefit the Kurds if the process is successful, because to be realistic, the PKK has lost its operation capacity against Turkey for years now. And I don't think that the armed struggle is progressing the Kurdish cause any longer. And apparently Abdullah Öcalan is clearly seeing this and saying that the PKK has completed its life course and needs to dismantle as any other organization that hasn't been forcibly eliminated. Any questions? I'm happy to elaborate further.
Thank you for your explanation. Please, if anyone has any questions, we can take 1 to 2 questions to Mr. Mashuq.
May I ask him a question?
Yeah, sure, Professor.
Mashuq, it's good to see you again after 10 years. The last time we saw each other, we were with Dr. Martin van Brunissen in China, thinking about Kurds in China. And I appreciate very much your remarks. And I'd like to just briefly ask you, if the PKK really listens to Öcalan and disbands, do you really think they would disband? As you know, but you know better than I, there's an enormous PKK organization, and many of them are what we would call civilians. Are they just going to quit and go home? And is this really possible that they're going to listen to some 75-year-old guy who's been in prison for 25 years? A completely new PKK leadership has developed. I used to joke that one way the Turks could break up the PKK would be to let Öcalan out of jail, and then he would start challenging the new PKK leadership, because I don't think the current PKK leadership is going to disband willingly. They're going to wait and see what happens. But what do you think? Is the PKK going to disband now?
Well, thank you so much, and it's great seeing you again after our great time in China. Hope we reunite again somewhere in the world. And I hope you're doing well in the Trump land these days. So
no, I'm very upset about Trump land.
Well, I mean, let's start with that. Obviously, it is the time of strong man. So when we see people like Trump on the global scale, but also people like Erdogan or Bahçeli, or even like, given the gravity or the power of Abdullah Öcalan for his organization and the wider Kurdish political movement in Turkey and Rojava, obviously the sides have some sort of leverage. But I totally understand your suspicion about whether the PKK is going to disband. And at this moment, we cannot be 100% sure. What we see is that there was a positive response to Abdullah Öcalan's call that came 1 or 2 days after his historic call. His historic call is read out in Istanbul by the Kurdish MPs, and the PKK declared a ceasefire requiring security guarantees and Abdullah Öcalan's access for his party to disband. So obviously, this is a political organization that's mainly used violence to achieve its goals. But in the process, in the 90s, obviously, it has turned into a social and political movement with legal parties and civil society organizations. And also with all its branches like PKK in Iran, and then obviously with the ideological umbrella, what we see with the KCK and other organizations in Rojava, it is hard to imagine that all these organizations are going to disappear overnight. What is possible, though, PKK has been a pragmatic organization. And even though we don't know the details of the letter and the assurances that they received from Abdullah Öcalan, their response to declare ceasefire and requiring security guarantees for the PKK Congress together and Abdullah Öcalan's access to the Congress to disband is obviously a positive development. Of course, we can say that the PKK is going to negotiate this. They may not do this. They may change their names, as in the past they have done it. Like in early 2000s, also the PKK kind of dissolved into a new political structure that encompassed the armed and legal and civil society and all that. I believe that it is possible for the PKK to change the course of things if they think the concessions given by the Turkish state and the guarantees are provided are satisfactory for them. But this doesn't mean that it will bring a democratic opening that all of the sudden will turn the land of Turks and Kurds into the land of milk and honey.
Well, do you see any? Will Turkey make any concessions to the Kurds? I haven't seen a thing. Öcalan is still in prison. I don't even think they'll let him out of prison.
I mean, it's too early. Still, it's too early. It has been about like 2 weeks or a little more. But what we understand from the statements of MPs, obviously some concessions are on the horizon, especially the release of Kurdish political prisoners and some sort of constitutional changes. And of course, some of it is related to the international developments in the Middle East, and the other parts are related to what Erdogan wants to do in the next election cycle and how he wants to basically create this, consolidate his power, create a new coalition that brings together the Kurdish party on one hand and MHP on the other hand. So, of course, we will see what the development is going to be. If the Turkish state and its now neo-Ottomanist government in charge reads the history correctly, they may have also learned some lesson from Selim the Grim and the agreement of him with Idrisi Bitlisi. So the undertone of Abdullah Öcalan's letter reminded me of whether Abdullah Öcalan wants to be the second Idrisi Bitlisi, but I hardly doubt it, because Erdogan and Bahçeli are not Selim the Grim, and the conditions are quite different. So it is a very fine line. And while Abdullah Öcalan wants to broker a peace, a lasting peace for the Middle East, he may well be called a traitor in the future if this fails. So it is a big risk, but he takes the responsibility as he states in his letter.
Thank you, both of you, Professor Michael and Professor Mashuq. We will take only one more question with Dr. Serdar. Please, can you start with your question?
Thank you very much, but I think there were other people ahead of me that raised their hands. I don't know.
Okay, we'll take them too. We'll take them too. But please.
But I don't want to go kind of ahead of.
Go ahead, talk.
Okay, no problem. We'll take them too.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Apologize.
Thank you.
Yeah. If you read the letter of the Öcalan, there are 9 times mentioned democracy, and if you just have a kind of a quick look at the Turkish situation, it's hardly democratic, as not going democratic, and it's actually quite obviously it's kind of authoritarian, competitive authoritarian. So I don't know how do these two are matching. Yeah, it's like aiming for democracy in circumstances that it's not going democratic. And domestically looking, the main purpose of Erdogan in starting this in order to create a possibility, change the constitution, and within it extend or renew or find, in Arabic they call it hila shar'i, or is kind of a legal justification for his continuation. So I kind of find it hard to reconcile these two positions. I think my question probably for both Michael and Mashuq at the same time, if they willing to answer. Thank you.
Sure, I can go first briefly, Michael, if you want. Okay, perfect. Thank you, Serdar. Good to see you. Well, you're definitely right. There is a huge emphasis in the letter on democratic reform, democratization. Democracy is only viable solution for the democratic governance and the societal change. And even, I mean, the letter itself is called Peace and Democratic Society, right? So Of course, I have already indicated that the interlocutors are not democratic at all. On one hand, we have Erdogan, who has literally created an authoritarian regime without free press, freedom of expression, accountability, a transparent and just governance. And on the other hand, for example, if this is related to the broader regional situation, the other interlocutor is Ahmed al-Shar'a, a rebranded guy who was on the terrorist watch list at the most wanted top of the list. And what he promises is that there will be a democratic transition that includes all parts of Syria, including the Kurds, and there will be some sort of free elections in the 3-4 years. So it is very uncertain, even though Abdullah Öcalan kind of like backtracks or disowns his political paradigms, as his staunch supporters would say, from nation state to federation, autonomous administration, or even culturalist approaches, as he sees it, are not the solution to the Kurdish question and is not responding to the need of people, as he claims. But it is not clear, apart from repeated stress on democracy in the letter, how this is going to be achieved. What is the roadmap? What is the process look like? What kind of concessions and steps are going to be taken? Apart from some unofficial release or observations of the MPs who were with Öcalan, who met him a couple of times. So there is still a lot of unknown situation that we are not aware of. And we don't know if Erdogan is really dreaming this kind of like, North European style democracy. So I don't think that it is looking very bright in terms of democratization. But obviously, some of these steps sometimes have unintended or undesired effects. So this could indeed open a space for the public, for the Kurdish and Turkish public, to pursue a more challenging political struggle on the ground. And it could kind of like, force the Turkish government to make some changes, especially given the sensitivity of the situation. But at the moment, I don't think that the democratization is just a given opportunity in Turkey that you can take it. You will have to struggle for it. And under Erdogan, it has been increasingly difficult. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Professor Michael, you can answer your question, but please, if you can, as brief as possible, because we have another.
I understand. Yes, very briefly. I don't think this is going to be a successful peace process, but Öcalan at least tried. And the onus is now on Turkey to show some democracy and some willingness to negotiate. And if Turkey refuses to do that, then Öcalan at least will get credit for having tried to accomplish something here. And the second thing, we have to remember Kurdish divisions. Right now, the PKK has been fighting a war against the KRG in northern Iraq for several years. Any settlement that the PKK reaches with Turkey is not necessarily going to affect Kurds in other countries. We have to remember, notoriously, the Kurdish divisions. Öcalan likes to claim that he speaks for all the Kurds. He does not speak for all the Kurds. There's a guy named Barzani and so forth, who also speak. And even in Turkey, there are many Kurds who have assimilated. I think, for example, the foreign minister of Turkey, Fidan, is an ethnic Kurd. And we have to remember that Öcalan is not speaking for all the Kurds. Okay, that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We will take only one more question with Dr. Jalal. Please come start with your question, but if you could, as brief as possible, because we have another speakers to talk and we have more questions to ask.
Hi for everyone, and I'm glad to participate in this great event. I think Turkish. Do you hear me?
Yes.
I hear you.
Yes.
I think Turkish is wasting time and wants to prevent the progress and support for Kurdish issues in the Middle East. And Turkish does not it does not see the Kurdish as an issues in Turkey. That is what is missing is true in the process. So is the so-called peace process in Turkey a peace process in the trust sense of the word, where Turkish leaders still can call the PKK a terrorist? I ask Mr. Gunter, I ask why a terrorist understand peace. Thanks so much.
I'm sorry, I did not understand your question. Could you repeat it, please?
I ask why a terrorist understand peace. The Turkish leaders still call the PKK as a terrorist.
Well, I don't think the PKK is any more terrorist than the Turkish government. As a matter of fact, when I met Öcalan 25 years ago, just a year before he was captured, I met him in Syria. We visited together and talked for 3 days, off and on, and not all the time. We spent some time playing football and volleyball together, and we ate a lot and so forth. Öcalan told me, yes, of course, I've made mistakes. There's been some terrorism that we committed, but if you look at history, you'll see the real terrorist is the Turkish state. So this branding of the PKK as a terrorist organization is a political statement. One man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. Let's remember that.
Thank you so much, Professor Michael. We are returning to Mr. Vedat as we interrupted due to some technical issues. Mr. Vedat, please come start with your statement, and I wish you can solve the technical issue.
So sorry for the trouble in internet connection. That I mentioned that I'm in home now because it's late night in Turkey. I'm not in office now. I think the internet modem is far to my working room. So I apologize everyone for the internet connection problem. So let me finish with a few sentences, please. In my opinion, describing the current situation as an election strategy of the Turkish state mind aimed at prolonging the usefulness of the current government in terms of bureaucratic hegemony is closer to being an expression of the truth. The talks between PKK and Öcalan and the Turkish state is a temporary collaboration between the state and DEM party as the two dramatically losers of the last few elections, which the first one aims to continue its central power and the latter regional. As for the DEM party's position here, we should not ignore the economic, legal, and social privileges of being a member of parliament in Turkey and the attractiveness of the construction rent generated by local governments. It can be said that this is nothing more than a bargaining to obtain the parliamentary support needed to change the constitution, which will pave the way for the incumbent President Erdogan to make candidate for a third time. Öcalan, the PKK, and the DEM party are treated as interlocutors by the state and are endowed with the so-called prestige of representing the Kurds politically. In this way, by creating the image that only the DEM party is the natural and only interlocutor of Kurdish voters, an attempt is made to prevent the young and secular inclined Kurdish population living in metropolitan areas from voting for the opposition. And in the last words, I finish my words. with respect for the sad memories of the Turks and Kurds who lost their lives during the conflict. In my last words, I would like to repeat my sincere thanks to Sbey Research Center and especially dear Ahang Habib Hawrami for providing me to have the chance of being here and talking to you. Best wishes for everyone.
Thank you so much, Professor Vedat. Basically, your
I repeat my apologies for my technical trouble.
Thank you so much. No problem. Based on your speech, I have a question as a Turkish scholar. How would you characterize the Turkish perspective on the process, this situation to Turkey and the government and the head of the government, President Erdogan? How do you characterize his perspective based on your opinion and your view as a Turkish scholar?
In my studies, I don't think about the economic parties or political actors in Turkish state because I define the Turkish state tradition as oriented despotism. So it is different from the tradition of Hellenistic or Romanesque Senate. So I think we cannot talk about democracy or parties or political leaders in the Turkish state tradition. We can only talk about state mind. You know, we call it as hikmet-i hükümet or devlet aklı in Turkish or in Ottoman. So I think Erdogan or Bahçeli or Öcalan or PKK is not very important in this process. There are only two actors in the process, the state mind of Turkish state and the Kurdish class, Kurdish new middle class in northern Kurdistan.
Okay, thank you so much for your explanation. Does anyone has any question to Mr. Vedat, please? I'm waiting to see if anyone has any question to Mr. Vedat, and then I'll go into to carry on with my questions.
I don't think so.
Okay, thank you so much for your explanation. I have a question for both Professor Michael and Professor Mashuq about the obstacles in front of the peace process. In your point of view, do you see any obstacles domestically and regionally or internationally, or based on your perspective to both sides, obstacles in front of PKK to reach the realistic peace peace resolution, and to the Turkey too? Do you think that there is a real obstacle to reach the major peace process? I'm going to start with anyone who wants to speak first.
Want to go first, Michael?
Yes.
Great.
Okay, thank you. Professor Michael, can you start with your...
Oh, you want me to start?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I think the obstacles are what I said in the first place. I don't think the two parties really are on the same parallel. Again, Turkey is talking about a problem of terrorism and wants to have the PKK disarm and disband. That's what Turkey's interested in. The PKK and its supporters are interested in a real change in the way Kurds are treated in Turkey, including a constitutional change, which would allow a certain amount of Kurdish rights guaranteed in the Turkish constitution. And I just don't think that's what the Turkish government wants to talk about. So I think that's one big obstacle. Let's get the two sides to agree on an agenda. I don't think they even have an agenda yet. Number two, again, the Kurdish divisions. Not only in Turkey are there a lot of Kurdish divisions, but Kurdish divisions throughout the Middle East. So this peace process, even if it gets underway, it's not speaking for the Kurds internationally in the Middle East. You have to remember these Kurdish divisions. So that's the second obstacle, Kurdish divisions. And third of all, I think we're exaggerating this whole peace process. Much more important, and maybe this is an obstacle to the peace process, much more important is what's going on with Israel and Hamas and Palestine and Iran. And the Turks, the Kurds at the most are very secondary here. And so that's an obstacle to the peace process. The peace process is really very small compared to what is really going on in the Middle East, and for that matter, the entire world. Given, look what's Ukraine or Taiwan. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Mashuq. We are starting with you answering the questions.
Sure. Well, thank you for the question. It's an important question, and I think there are multi-layered challenges and obstacles for this process to materialize and finalize in some sort of a desired, mutually agreed conclusion. I want to be hopeful, as I said, but I think we cannot interpret the situation without looking at what is happening internationally. On the global scale, we see the erosion of democratic processes and kind of the emergence of some sort of techno-fascism, the strongman rule, the illiberal democracies, and so on. Regionally, after October 7 and 8, obviously, we see a new order emerging in the Middle East that several organizations have been eliminated, including Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas in Gaza, and of course the severe human rights violations and the violence that has ensued. And obviously in this dynamic, each side has their own interest, and Middle East and Turkey is quite important for all these developments. First and foremost, in the international level, we see a changing global order and kind of NATO, the NATO transformation under Trump administration. And Turkey is an important member of NATO, one of the biggest armies of NATO. And obviously this provided a lot of leverage and security for Turkey previously. A changing structure with NATO and like Europe investing in self-protection and security obviously will have repercussions for Turkey. Either Turkey is going to have a stronger hand by playing as a regional emerging patron of several other countries in the war technology and the drone technology, and it could basically become a stronger part of the European Union. So, but on the other hand, obviously what we see is that there is conflicting interest between Turkey and Israel. Israel, especially on the regional level, desires a more decentralized Syria, a Syria that cannot create any threat for Israel, but moreover, the transition, or what Israel calls the axis, the Shia axis. And what Israel wants to do is to eliminate Hezbollah's influence in Syria and obviously kind of break as much as possible the Iran's influence in the region. The other challenge is, so this is the international challenge, and we don't know how the sides are going to agree upon or conflict, what kind of conflict it may emerge in the process. There is also a national situation with this. As we have already indicated, Turkey's government has been a very authoritarian, problematic in the last decade or so. And I don't know if it is really possible for them to backtrack and like just return to, let's say, the early 2000s when everyone was seeing Turkey as an example of a Muslim democracy. So the national challenge is obviously with the current situation in Turkey, what we see is a kind of Islamist nationalist coalition, but they seem to be willing to engage in this situation, even though, I mean, they don't call it a peace process at all, or they don't call it some sort of like, you know, a Kurdish opening. Even we don't know what the name is. Abdullah Öcalan calls it as peace and democratic society, obviously call for peace and democratic society. So there is this political structure in Turkey, but at the moment, except one party, the Good Party, which was like kind of an offshoot of the nationalist movement party, MHP, apart from that, all political parties seem to be at least in the public level endorsing or supporting any opening. But in reality, we don't know how this will unfold as the situation becomes more clear and if there is any roadmap. And obviously, the third challenge is the challenge or the obstacle of public. For a century, the Turkish state's official discourse has been of denial of the Kurds, assimilation of the Kurds, deprivation of their rights, cultural, civil, political rights, collective rights, and the structural racism or the Turkish supremacist mindset has been incubated in the education system, in the religion. I have written a couple of articles about this for those who want to engage with discussion more. So now transforming this public into a peace and democracy loving public on the Turkish part, I think is one of the biggest challenges. But of course, the Turkish public also make some pragmatic calculation in these situations. And I think first and foremost, initially, the reason why Devlet Bahçeli led this opening, so-called opening, and called for Abdullah Öcalan to come and speak in the Turkish assembly is about the PR aspect of this. So in brief, I see three challenges. One is the international order and the global scale changes with NATO, with the strongman, with the conflicting interest of Israel and Turkey, as well as the sides that has been less influential at the moment, Iran and Russia. There is the national challenge, the Turkish democracy and political parties. And the third challenge is obviously the challenge of Turkish public and the racism and supremacist mindset that has been in place for a century. Changing this and transforming people into peace-loving people that will just easily accommodate the Kurds as their equal counterparts is, I think, a big obstacle, and it's one of the biggest challenges that we will see in the coming decades.
Thank you so much for your question, Professor Mashuq. I'm going to ask you one more question based on your perspective about the younger generation opinions. Professor Mashuq, what is the Kurdish generation in Turkey are seeing the peace process? What do they expect about the peace process? Are they optimistic or pessimistic?
Well, I think there are mixed feelings there. So for the Kurdish youth, obviously for a decade or so, we have been observing an increasing nationalist sentiments among the Kurds, especially after 2015 and 16 and the failure of what was called the self-autonomous administration declaration that kind of followed by the state's brutal intervention into Kurdish towns and cities resulted in the death of 3,000 people, including security forces and civilians, the temporary or permanent displacement of 500,000 Kurds from these towns, the destruction of some of the UNESCO World Heritage Sites, such as the Sur district of Diyarbakir. So obviously after that, many Kurds have some sort of resentment against what has happened and the insistence on a mistake, as many people have seen it. So at this moment, such an opening obviously is kind of met with some sort of suspicion by a part of public. I would say more critical or more Kurdish nationalist part of public is approaching it that way. Whereas obviously, like, you know, there is more supporters, like the staunch supporters of the PKK would see this as a historical paradigm change or a game changer and stuff like that. But I think we have every reason to be more cautious about, like, you know, what this could bring. Saying that, obviously, in the Kurdish public sphere, especially among the youth, any normalization would be welcomed and appreciated. In the last 10 years, the region has gone through severe human rights violations. The whole region has been securitized. The checkpoints at the entry and exits of the Kurdish towns and cities, the caracols, the military bases spread all around the Kurdish mountains and towns, the temporary watch points, the village guards, the city watchman, and all these people basically kind of like, you know, observing, surveilling the Kurdish public sphere. And everyone is feeling this pressure coming from the state, let alone all the government appointed trustees, the disrespect for the Kurdish democratic choice of the Kurdish mayors, and so on and so on. So obviously, Kurds would appreciate any normalization. Any normalization would be good for Kurds.
Thank you so much for your question, for your answers and explanation, both of you, Professor Michael and Professor Mashuq. Actually, there's you mentioned key challenges, which all of them are very significant. Alongside that, we have many more challenges, particularly the legal and constitutional challenges. As for now, the Kurdish language and Kurdish identity remains as the most sensitive issue in the Turkey. And also, maybe the Turkey, one of the most challenges is to reform in both educational system, even in constitutional system. For many decades ago, the Kurdish language have been in sidelining process. For this situation needs more time, and the challenges are much more. You mentioned the key challenges. So I'm going to go on with the questions. I have a question about the conditions, the conditions that both PKK and Turkey are in to reach a realistic resolution. I'm going to ask a question for both of Professor Vedat and Professor Michael about if Turkey generally seeks to address the Kurdish issue, which specific actions should it consider beyond the military measures? Mr. Vedat, you can start first. But
if I may add
if you can please, as brief as possible. Yes, come on. Okay.
I think Professor Gunter
yes, we are waiting for the speech.
Also, if I made a small thing about the Kurdish youth, I see that Reha Ruhavioğlu is in the room. The Kurdish Studies Center and Ravest Araştırma, Ravest Research, based in Ahmet, have done a great research about the Kurdish youth, their dreams, ideals, and fears, and their expectations from a democratic governance. It's published in English and Turkish, and I think it is available also in Kurdish Kurmanji. So just for those who are interested in reading about the Kurdish youth's reaction, this report would be useful, and I can try to find the link for that. Sorry.
Thank you so much. That would be much appreciated. Mr. Vedat, we are waiting for your start to answer the question.
Okay, I think the process is not a real peace process. Because as the speakers mentioned, the Turkish state is not still a real democratic and parliamentary state. I think the bureaucrats, the army leaders, army bureaucrats of the Turkish state will not let the process to finish as we want. It will be only a short time to election on 2028. So we will watch again a nationalist, a centralist state again. So I don't think it's a serious process. I will not. I don't think about. I don't think anything about the process will be a really peace process like in Ireland or in Latin America. Okay. So I don't think it's a seriously process about a peacetime.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for your explanation. Professor Michael, I am waiting for you.
Okay, here I am. First of all, some very specific things. This thing of DEM electing mayors in Kurdish populated cities in southeastern Turkey, and then the government removes the mayors and puts in trustees. Let's stop this. If the DEM wins the election, don't eliminate the mayor and put in a government trustee. How about some real freedom of speech and freedom of press? If you criticize the government, you should not immediately go to prison. Okay, how about guilt by association? I have a number of friends in Turkey who are actually, some of them are even Turkish nationalists, and they've lost their jobs because of guilt by association with the Gulenist movement. I'm not even sure there really was a Gulenist coup. It was all too convenient, as Erdogan himself said. It was a gift of God, allowing him to become much more powerful in Turkey. It's sort of like the Reichstag fire in 1933 allowed Hitler to come to power. We want some real language rights. Theoretically, we have made some progress in Turkey with language rights, but there are so many difficulties put in the way of the language rights and teaching Kurdish in the universities and in the schools, or having classes in Kurdish. Let's have real language rights here instead of just a Potemkin pretend situation here. So we really are talking about rewriting the Turkish constitution. The Turkish constitution was written by the military back in 1981, I think. It's time to have a more democratic constitution for all the Turkish people, and that includes the Kurds, recognizing democratic rights like speech and press, language rights, social rights, and there's a lot of specific things here that I think should be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you so much. The attendees, please, Mr. Pero, you can now ask your question. If you have any question about the explanation of both of the professors, you can start your speech.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Kag Nawras, for letting me to speak. Actually, I have a question for Michael Gunter regarding the role of the KRI, Kurdistan region of Iraq, in the peace process in Turkey. So my question exactly is that, do you think that the KRI will be able to play a crucial role in the peace process in the Turkey, especially when PKK, the leader of the PKK, has announced to put down their weapons and PKK must resolve themselves? Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Maybe, as you know, the KRI, KRG, and PKK are actually having a low-level war against each other, and have for several years. Barzani seems to get along much better with the Turkish government than the PKK does. Yes, I think behind the scenes, the KRG, they're legitimate Kurdish patriots. They just see it a different way from the PKK. So behind the scenes, maybe Barzani, the KRG, can nudge Turkey toward a greater understanding of Kurdish rights in Turkey. But we have to remember what I was saying earlier, Kurdish divisions. And the Turks have often used divide and rule tactics to play the Kurds off against each other. And they certainly have done that between the KRI and the PKK over the years. Thank you.
Thank you so much for both of you, Kakpero, for your question, and Professor Michael for your answer. Anyone has any more question about the question? Okay, moving on for my final question for three of the speakers and for attendees, anyone who want to answer it or to participate, about the Kurds in Syria, the Rojava, as we call it in Kurdish language. As the Assad's fall, a new page of the Kurdish revolution in Kurdish in Syria started. In the last days, we have seen the agreement, the signing of memorandum of understanding between Ahmed, president of Syria, and the Mazloum Abdi, head of the Kurds, the Syrian Democratic Forces in Syria. In your opinion, anyone who wants to answer the question, the future of the Turkey and PKK peace agreement will have any effect on the Kurds in Syria, and or how the Kurds in Syria can get its relation with Syria without any foreign influence on his relation domestically with the government in Damascus. Anyone want
So
to
you want me to
participate?
briefly say something? Because
Okay,
I want to
okay,
hear what
okay.
Professor Kurt has to say too. But very briefly, it is theoretically possible if Turkey and the PKK can come to some kind of understanding, since Turkey considers the SDF an arm of the PKK and therefore is constantly attacking the Syrian Kurds. Turkey constantly, along with its proxies, attacking the Syrian Kurds. If there can be an agreement between the PKK and Turkey, this might be very good for the Syrian Kurds and take some of the rationale for Turkey constantly attacking and killing Syrian Kurds because Turkey claims they are stooges for the PKK. Now, as you know, the United States has given some support to the SDF for its own reasons to control the possibility of a resurgence of ISIS, and also because there's oil in that part of Syria. But the fact that the United States has some interest in the SDF and does not consider the SDF terrorists, even though it's apparently has close relations with the PKK, which the U.S. does consider to be terrorists. I think all this is the peace process between the PKK and Turkey might have some positive influence here. I certainly would like to see some. And the fact that for the first time in the history of Syria, modern Syria, that there seems to be some recognition by Damascus of the Syria of Kurds as Kurds in Syria, I think that's very positive too. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your brief answer. Anyone who want to explain his answer to the question, you're welcome.
Vedat, do you want to go?
Okay, I can say only in the context of the Rojava and the KRG, and also the in the process of Turkey, the Kurdish nation building process seems to have been postponed to an indefinite future in all three parts, I think. In three parts of Kurdistan, I think.
Thank you so much for your answer. Professor Mashuq, we are hearing you.
Yes. Well, I think it is an important question. And to some, actually, the whole logic behind this new negotiation with Abdullah Öcalan has nothing to do with the democratization of Turkey, but it is solely related to the developments in Syria in general and in Rojava. So obviously, I think Turkey made some sort of peace or acknowledged that they cannot completely eliminate the Syrian Kurdish forces and all the institutions and structures there. And it seems that they want to kind of like, you know, benefit from this negotiation to have as much as influence on what kind of shape the new Syrian state building is going to take. So in that regard, I think it has already impacted what is happening in Syria. The recent memorandum of understanding, I want to call it, is not independent from what has happened on 27th with Öcalan's call. It wouldn't happen, in my opinion, if there was uncertainties there. So I do think that this call, Abdullah Öcalan's call, has far-reaching implications for the people of Rojava and their constitutional rights. Even though I think by disowning the autonomous administration, Abdullah Öcalan set the course for what kind of shape the new agreement between the SDF and the new Syrian administration is going to take. So that is obviously one thing. And the other, I don't think Abdullah Öcalan's call should be read independently from all this broader context. So there are things that we need to read between the lines and stuff like that, because by its nature, it has been very secretive, clandestine. We don't know what is going on. As I said, the Kurdish public wants to remain optimistic, especially people of Rojava with their great sacrifices. Over 12,000 shaheeds, or 10,000s of people being veteran, and all the political struggle. But obviously, Turkey is not the only player on the ground when it comes to Syria. And maybe not for the sake of the Kurds, but Americans will obviously kind of recalibrate their position in terms of what kind of directions their negotiation with Iran will take place and how Israel's security in the region will be achieved. So in that regard, I completely believe that Rojava is at the center of this debate. And lastly, I want to say that the Kurdish struggle for self-determination, for rights, for freedoms, for a life in dignity have not started with the PKK. And with the PKK disbandment, it is not going to end. Kurdistan question is a transnational question. And the people of Kurdistan have already achieved, at least on the emotional level, some sort of unity, and they will continue to fight for their struggles and rights. In which form it is going to take shape, we don't know. But this recent call and the political events happening around it can shape the future of the Middle East and Kurdistan in the decades to come. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your answer for both of the speakers, Professor Michael, Professor Vedat, and Professor Mashuq, and the other attendees. I'm finishing with my questions. Thank you for being with you. I am going to take my co-host, Ahang Khan. She will come with an end with you. Thank you so much for your participation, and it is all for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nawras. Thank you so much for such an insightful and engaging discussion, our respected speakers and attendees. It has been a great pleasure to have you all, and I'm happy to tell you that after this webinar, we will design a report on the insights of this webinar, and hopefully we will send the report to you all our attendees and our respected speakers. And as confirmed before, and like we confirmed via the emails that we sent to all attendees and speakers, we will publish a recording of this webinar to our respected audiences and to public to be informed of. And no more point remain from my side, but I just want to have a special thank to Dr. Robert Talat, General Manager of Sbey Research Center, and Dr. Kardo Rashid, Head of the Turkish Studies Unit, whose dedication and efforts made this possible. Thank you so much for your time. It has been a great pleasure. We had a great discussion and insightful engagement discussion. Thank you so much. Have a very good evening from our side and from your respected countries, which I don't know the time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Zor Spaz, everyone. Shab bakhair,
Thank you so much, and Zor Spaz from Diyarbakir.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.